She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, rocking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time. Shipping vessels of history, ancient history, destroying the fabric, the godlike claw of destiny, of a people, with a gun, a knife, a cannon, building the hideous wall of blood called slavery. She challenged it with burning eyes and black skin, torn skin, whipped skin, degraded skin, smashed skin, dehumanized.
Well, greetings as always. Welcome back. I hope all is well with everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. And the Daily Mail reported and other outlets reported last week, and we touched on this, that President Trump has deployed 2 nuclear submarines near Russia after, quote, foolish and inflammatory taunts, end quote, in major escalation. And the new move of the submarines to, quote, appropriate regions, end quote, appears mostly symbolic. And the U.S. already, and the reason it's mostly symbolic is because the United States already has dozens of nuclear-powered submarines that are constantly ready to strike in the event of a conflict. Nevertheless, this notches up the tensions once again after Donald Trump announced that he was moving up his ultimatum for ultimatum for Russia to agree to end the war. Is Russia really rattled by Trump's threats and the submarines? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
And folks, welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which these events take place. And we're having some technical difficulties with my guest, Colonel Wilkerson. So we're going to proceed. If we can rectify or solve the problem, we will. Otherwise, then we'll just have to move him to another day this week. But so with that, let me do this. I've got some issues. Brother Willie Hicks, welcome. Greatly appreciate you. And Kevin Baptiste, my brother, thank you. So there are some things I want to cover here, and let me ask you all in the chat to let's see how we can engage each other. If you all have questions of me, please provide those questions in the chat, and if I can provide insight, I'll do the best that I can. With that being said, I want to touch on this issue relative to Donald Trump's issue with the submarines, because again, there are a lot of experts that will tell you that the sending 2 more submarines into the mix is not that big of a deal. And I can understand that logic, and I agree with that logic. But it's the language that I find to be incredibly, incredibly concerning. When Donald Trump says, tell Medvedev, the failed former president of Russia, who thinks he's still president, to watch his words. He's entering very dangerous territory. Well, A, that's undiplomatic. It's not presidential at all. It does nothing to further dialogue. Why would the president of the United States, someone who I think up until this point, most in the world would consider to be, the most powerful person in the world, why would he resort to such juvenile rhetoric? That again, that doesn't move the dialogue forward. Thank God that people such as President Putin and President Xi have much broader perspective and worldviews, that they don't fall for this bait. Here's something that I think is very important for folks to consider. Time. You've heard the adage, I've said this on the show before. One of the things that you will hear from folks in the Middle East, you have the watches, but we have the time. And I don't know how many of you all have actually really thought through what that means when they say, you have the watches, but we have the time. The United States is 249 years old. 249 years old. China traces it. Oh, Kevin Baptiste, thank you very much for that $5 super sticker, and I'll get to your question in a second. China is 5,000 years old. They trace their culture 4,000 to 5,000 years old compared to 249 years. Russia traces its history and culture a couple thousand years back. So when your culture has that level of history, that means you've seen a few things in your day. You've been through a few things in your day. You've learned a few things over this span of time. And so, you know, when the young punks come on the playground and they start running around and, you know, doing what they do, those thousands of years of history give you a different perspective. They give you a worldview. They give you, what did Dr. King tell us? The moral arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. You've seen that arc a lot longer than that 249-year-old. You know, when you're 3,000 years old, that 249-year-old young whippersnapper can't quite grasp what you can grasp. So you have to look at, they look at the world through a different lens. And that's why up to this point, whether it's Iran, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, they're not, it's much, much harder to get them to react, to get them to respond, because their calculus is different. They're doing math at a whole nother level than Donald Trump, than Joe Biden. You know, Joe Biden thought, well, because again, folks, when you think about this Ukraine piece, a lot of people forget Ukraine sent troops to the Russian border. I want to say that was 2022. I might be a year off on that. Remember, they sent like 80,000 troops to the Russian border, trying to bait Putin into a response. And what did Putin do? He picked up the phone and he called Joe Biden. And he said, Joe, you need to get those troops off of my border. You're not going to provoke me into a response. But understand, if I choose to respond, my response will be asymmetrical and disproportionate. A lot of folks don't remember that exchange between Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden. My response will be asymmetrical. And if you don't grasp that, look it up in a military context. Basically, what that means is we're not going tit for tat. You come at me with tanks, I'm coming at you with missiles. Asymmetrical and disproportionate. And Biden called Zelensky and told Zelensky, hey, man, back that thing up. Back that thing on up. Get those troops off the border. And things quieted down. And see, again, that, and remember, I want to say that was in, I think it was April of 22. And that's what prompted the meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, between Biden and Putin. They said, look, we gotta sit down. And might have been 21. And that's where Putin gave Biden his security demands, and Biden ignored them. And then that following February is when Russia came across the border into Ukraine with their military intervention. So just all of that to say that it's really, really important as we are taken through this exercise that you can't view China's response to the United States. You can't view Russia's response to the United States. You can't view Iran's response to the United States through a Western prism. That's really the point in this diatribe, is you can't view their action through our mindset because they don't think like us. They'll never think like us. That's why they're outthinking us, is because they've got a much longer moral arc of history upon which to calculate their responses and their reactions. So let me finish this point, and then I'll go to some of your comments. So what do we find out today? So Donald Trump gave Vladimir Putin this 50-day ultimatum about 15 days ago, I guess. Remember, Trump tells Putin, you got 50 days to solve this conflict with Ukraine, or I'm going to impose more sanctions. And then maybe 10 days ago, maybe last week, Trump says, I'm tired of this. You got 9 days. You got 10 days. Well, what does Putin do? Earlier today, Russian troops delivered a strike by precision weapons, including Kinzhal, hypersonic missiles, and unmanned aerial vehicles, hitting Ukrainian military airfields over the last 24 hours in a special military operation. So it appears to me that Russia wasn't rattled by Donald Trump's threat. And here's what Medvedev said to Donald Trump's threat. Trump's playing the ultimatum game with Russia. Each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but his own country. Don't go down the Sleepy Joe road. So, folks, I think those of us in the West need to pay very close attention to the back and forth here, because bear this in mind, unlike Donald Trump, Russia doesn't threaten. Russia doesn't bluff. China doesn't threaten. China doesn't bluff. Iran doesn't bluff. They tell you what they're going to do, and then they do it. Part of the problem is, as Minister Farrakhan said about the big mistake the United States was making when it decided to go into Iraq, he said, go back to the minister's words, he said, the United States is blinded by its arrogance. He said, your arrogance is blinding you to the reality that is playing itself out right before your very eyes. He said, you don't see with your eyes. You see with a combination of the heart and the mind, and your arrogance is blinding you to the reality right before your very eyes. He said, George Bush is your modern Nebuchadnezzar. He's your modern Pharaoh. And I think we can now put Donald Trump in the same category. He's your modern Nebuchadnezzar. He's your modern Pharaoh. He's a man who thinks he has become a god beside God. He says, what did Pharaoh do? Stumbled over some slaves, lost his army, lost his kingdom. That's the Honorable Minister Farrakhan. And so you might want to take that under advisement, because again, what you're seeing with Russia now, with Russia now using these Kenzal hypersonic missiles, they've ratcheted up the response now. And the U.S. does not have any technology to match that Kenzal hypersonic technology. Iron Dome won't help you. THAAD missiles won't help you. There's nothing for you. They've got no response. And so some folks might ask, so why didn't Russia start with this technology? Good question. Answer is because they've been very, very calculated in their responses, because they don't want to, in the broader view, they do not want to be perceived or blamed as the one ratcheting up or escalating the conflict. So, and this is again where you've got to be very, very careful in how you analyze this, because if you just pay attention to Western media, well, all the blame falls on Russia. But if you actually understand the history of this conflict, going all the way back to the 90s, then you'll understand that they're being, whether it's Iran, whether it's China, whether they're all being incredibly restrained. But, you know, as my dad would say to me, that, you know, the 3,000-year-old talking to the 249-year-old, son, you don't want me to get out this chair. It's not going to work out well for you if I have to get out this chair. Or as I would, you know, my son would say to me, Daddy, how did you know? Hey, and my response to him was my dad's response, boy, been in this game a long time, seen a few things, learned a few things. That's why I know you all have heard the adage, the older you get, the smarter your parents become. And, you know, mine have long since passed, but rarely does a day go by when I sit back and go, damn, they told me this would happen. So, you know, so let's see here. Let's see what we've got here. Since I asked for some questions. Oh, okay. So Zhao Yun. I see Zhao Yun's chirped some things last week, and I said, hey man, provide me some evidence. And back then he couldn't, his response was, well, just go back and listen to your past shows. And he says, here's an example of a statement I made. The Russians didn't invade Ukraine. You've made several other false statements in past episodes. The Russians didn't invade Ukraine. And Zhao, you are right. I have made that statement. But you also have to understand the context in which, because I've always explained that statement. And the context, yeah, I mentioned it. And I said I'd get to the question in a minute. I mentioned it. Here's the context of that statement. I always use the word invade as an offensive, aggressive move, not a defensive move. So yes, Russia did invade Ukraine. That is true. That is technically correct. But to make that statement without the proper context is a misnomer. That's why the Russian action into Ukraine is what Russia calls what? Their military intervention. And which is why, Zhao, I made the point about, remember when Ukraine, at the request of the United States, sent the troops to the border. That was a provocation. So Russia invaded Ukraine, but it wasn't unprovoked. That's the point. That's the key. That's the reality that you always have to put this in Vladimir Putin sent troops across the border in response to Ukraine, NATO, United States provocation. So that's the point in which, so I'm not wrong in that statement. In the context of provocation. That's the point, I think. So if you want to stay stuck on that point, well, you said it. Okay, yeah, I said it. But if you understand the context in which I have made that statement, that it wasn't, here you go. NATO, the NATO secretary and many Europeans put out this false rhetoric, this false rationale that Russia is doing this to Ukraine because why? Why do they tell you that Russia is doing this? They tell you Russia is doing this. Why? To reunite the Soviet Union. That Vladimir Putin has these visions of grandeur, of taking over Europe. That's garbage. That's BS. There is not one statement made by Putin that any of those people can turn to that validates that position. So if you stay stuck in the mindset that Putin invaded Ukraine, then you have to ask, okay, why did he do it? Did he just wake up one Thursday morning and say, in February, and say, you know what I'm gonna do today? Now that I've had my breakfast, now that I've eaten my oatmeal, walked the dog, and read the paper, you know what? Oh, and washed the car. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna invade Ukraine. Mr. President, why are we doing this? Well, because I want to get the band back together. I want to reunite the Soviet Union. I want to take over Europe. I think that's what I'm going to do. No. No. And I'll say it one more time. No. That's not what's happened here. You send troops to the border. He tells you back them up. He gives you his list of security demands, which you ignore. You continue to put NATO countries on his border, and you continue to arm those countries with missiles pointing at his country. And he finally said, enough of this. Niet means niet. And for those of you that don't know that, look that up. Niet means niet. No means no. He finally, that was a cable. Let me see if I can find out who niet means niet. I'm trying to see who wrote the cable. Oh, William Burns. William Burns, who was the former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, who's now the CIA director, wrote this cable telling the those in charge of I'm trying to find a quick distillation of this. Basically saying you need to pay attention to what Russia is telling you. They're telling you no means no. Ukraine and Georgia's NATO aspirations not only touch a raw nerve in Russia, they endanger serious concerns about the consequences for stability in the region. Not only does Russia perceive encirclement and efforts to undermine Russia's influence in the region, but it also fears unpredictable and uncontrolled consequences, which would seriously affect Russia's security interests. Experts tell us that Russia is particularly worried that the strong divisions in Ukraine over NATO membership, with much of the ethnic Russian community against membership, could lead to a major split involving violence, at the worst, civil war. In that eventuality, Russia would have to decide whether to intervene, a decision Russia does not want to have to face. So you see, Zhao, if you sit there in that very narrow, limited mindset, that for most of what I can discern from what you post is based upon strictly watching MSNBC and CNN and not spending any time at all understanding the broader historical context in which these events are taking place, then you'll just stay in this nested do loop of, you said Russia I know I said that. But the CIA director, Bill Burns, former U.S. ambassador to Russia, sent a cable explaining Russia's mindset. And so if you ignore that, then you'll be taken down that rabbit hole that you seemingly continue to want to stay stuck in. Kevin, thank you for that super sticker. How can we lend any rationale to what this idiot is doing? I will assume, Kevin Baptiste, that the idiot you're referring to is Donald Trump. You can't, because there really is no rationale other than militarism, and you can't really offer any rationale. He wants to sell weapons. Maybe this is it. He wants to sell U.S. manufactured weapons to the European Union and to NATO. And he wants those weapons that he sells to be provided to Ukraine, because there are those in the intelligence world and in the world of the financial elite that somehow believe that a fight with Russia is in the best interest of the United States. What they base this on has no basis in reality, because that's an ass whooping waiting to happen. Same thing with China. Ass whooping waiting to happen. So again, other than sheer militarism, other than Trump's very, very fragile ego being challenged, there is no real rationale here. He's shocked that he wasn't able to pick up the phone, tell Vladimir Putin what to do, and Putin would do it. He's tripping the same way Joe Biden was tripping. Joe Biden really thought that they could scare Russia into compliance, that they would just acquiesce to the United States diktat. And they're finding out the world has changed. No, they can't. No, they won't. But now, because so much of American foreign policy is based upon this misperception of the unilateral world, instead of understanding that the dynamic has shifted and this is now a multilateral world, and Putin isn't going anywhere, Xi Jinping isn't going anywhere, China isn't going anywhere, Iran isn't going to go anywhere. Now they don't know what to do. They don't understand how to shift their mindset from the multipolar to the unipolar. I'm sorry, from the unipolar to the multipolar. They don't understand how to do that. They don't play well with others in the sandbox. The only thing they know is, these are my toys, I'm going to take them and go home. But now the world has said, take your toys. If we use toys, if we to be to be a symbol for the dollar, take your dollar and go home. Take your dollar and go home. We'll trade in our own currency. So I don't know, Kevin, if that's a significant answer. Cherie, did World War III begin with 9/11 or not? That's an interesting question that I think is too early to answer. Because there is still time for the aggression to be ratcheted down. There is still time for this jingoism to calm down, for this what's the word I'm looking for? I'm drawing a blank on the word. For this rhetoric to calm down. So Cherie, this is analogous to, I think, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand that then folks attribute to the beginning of World War I. Because remember, the war didn't break out as soon as Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. So we still have time to make the determination as to whether or not I would say to you that World War III hasn't started yet. So if you accept my premise that World War III hasn't started yet, then we still have time to avert the catastrophe. Cherie, hopefully that answers your question. And folks, I'm answering these questions as you write them. So I don't have a whole lot. This is really off the top of my head that I'm going. So considering the U.S. the most powerful nation in the world is buying into a delusional hype. That's why I said, get back with me. That's why I said once perceived or once was. I didn't say the United States is. I didn't say Donald Trump is the most powerful man in the world. I said that the United States was at a time, there was a time the U.S. was the most powerful country in the world, right after World War II ended. But that power has waned. And I think I've been very clear to make that point for a very long time, that that power has waned, and that the empire is slowly dying. Zhao Yun, I'm tired of you and tired of that. A random Jack, seems to me Trump is trying to play chess with a deck of cards he doesn't have. Absolutely right. Not only is he trying to play chess with cards he doesn't have, he's trying to play three-dimensional chess with folks that are already thinking in the fifth dimension. So, and I'm not going to start singing Up, Up, and Away with my beautiful balloon. But yeah, he's trying to play chess with a deck of cards. He's trying to play chess with checkers. I mean, we can make a whole bunch of analogies. That's the word I was struggling for before, analogy. Yeah, he's well out of his league, well out of his realm, well out of his mind. And Kevin, your question was rhetorical. I got it. Abdon, your belief and ours remains the same, waiting to go to heaven. Maybe if the death was mass, we would definitely go to heaven without playing a role. Okay, I don't quite understand that point, but thank you for making it. AM, hello. Challenge the argument, not the person, and being civil and respectful is a few guidelines. I think I get your, so AM, is your point relevant to Zhao? Because if it is, there was a reason that I went that way. Under normal circumstances, I would stick with the point, not the person. But when you, every day of this program, make points to me that are personal and engage with others in the chat that are personal, not only personal, but disrespectful, then sometimes you got to go that route. What's the end game? From Melody, what's the end game? Ego, empire, or chaos? Are we watching a dying superpower? Are we watching a dying superpower force the world to kneel, or is this a new kind of global brinksmanship? Well, it depends to a certain degree on who you are ascribing those attributes to. What's the end game? Ego, empire, or chaos? If you are asking that, Melody, in the context of the United States aggression, the answer is yes. This is all about ego, as in, particularly right now, Donald Trump, since he is the current president. Empire, yes, it is beyond Donald Trump's ego and beyond beyond Joe Biden's ego, beyond Barack Obama's ego, to the whole empire. Or chaos. Yes, chaos, I believe, is a major element of U.S. policy. I have always dubbed it as controlled chaos. The United States believes it can start these skirmishes, it can start these conflicts to continue to be able to feed the narrative of threat. So the United States starts the conflict in Afghanistan. Why? Because by doing so, the United States can continue to promote the narrative of threat. We have to fund the military. We have to pay for these weapon systems so that we can protect you against them. The United States did that in Iraq. Barack Obama did it with the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi. Always, they're trying to do it now in Burkina Faso with Traoré. That's why you've got General Langley, Michael Langley, testifying before the Senate, saying that Traoré is a threat and that we got to go in and arrest him. Always trying to create this chaos that they believe that they can control. That's what's happening in Syria right now. Hence the Wall Street Journal piece, how a Syrian rebel went from an American jail to seizing Aleppo. Because remember, Abu Muhammad al-Jilani was an American enemy. There was a, $10 million bounty on his head because the United States had labeled that man a terrorist. Well, now that the United States sees that that terrorist can now be utilized to further American interests, what happens? He goes from being Abu Muhammad al-Jilani, the terrorist with the $10 million bounty on his head, to being the leader of Syria. And so he changes his name, he takes off the fatigues, and he puts on a suit, and now he is the president of Syria. So all of this under the context or pretext of controlled chaos. Willie Hicks, Trump is a caveman that was sat in front of a computer. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that's a very good way to put it. I think, Willie, this follows your line or logic as well. When former Venezuelan president Hugo Chavez was at the UN and he was talking then about George W. Bush, after talking about smelling the sulfur, making, of course, the comparison to the devil, he said George W. Bush is as dangerous as a monkey with a razor blade. And I think that description is apt as well. Some more questions or some more points. And honestly, Biden wasn't much better with foreign policy. Willie, you're absolutely right. Which is why some people would tell you that, and Scott Ritter being one of them, that was the danger of Kamala Harris. When Kamala Harris was asked the question, what's the difference? What will be the difference between the foreign policy of a President Harris administration and a Biden administration? And she said, no difference. That's when Scott Ritter told you, well, she's going to take us into World War III because she's going to try to force Russia's hand in Ukraine. And that will be the precipitant, that will be the beginning of World War III. So to those folks that want to sit back now and look at what Donald Trump is doing, saying, you see, You see, Kamala Harris would not have gotten us into this domestic mess. That's true. I don't think that she would have taken the attack on the First Amendment, even though Joe Biden was doing that. I don't think that she would have nationalized the Marines in San Diego and sent the National Guard into Los Angeles. I don't think she would have gone that far. But we would be in peril just through other causes. So to think that Kamala Harris would have been benign is an incredibly bad mistake to make. Because when she tells you that she would have followed Biden policy, you'd be in World War III. There would still be starvation in Gaza, and the First Amendment would still be under attack, just in a slightly more subtle manner. I think that is important to, again, Zhao Yun, no one cares what Trump says. Au contraire. If no one cares what Trump says, why are we having this unrest and upheaval and this challenge to democracy in Texas? Why have the Democrats from Texas left Texas and gone other places? No, I think a lot of people care about what Donald Trump says, and a lot of people care about what Donald Trump does. For as insane as those things are, there are a lot of people listening to him and a lot of people acting upon what he says. DJ, aka Mr. Sandman, Trump should have just kept supplying Ukraine with weapons like Biden did. Sorry for that bad grammar, but Trump should have just kept supplying Ukraine with weapons like Biden did. No, DJ, also known as Mr. Sandman, no, that's wrong. That's just wrong. Escalating that conflict in Ukraine, you are smoking at the gas station. You are lighting the fuse to World War III. What you need to do, and that's not a you personal DJ, also known as Mr. Sandman. I'm not saying you. I'm saying that's a global you. What you need to do is recognize when you're getting your ass kicked. And when you're getting your butt kicked, that's when you need to go to a neutral corner and tap out. And because there's no win here. See, that's the thing, DJ, also known as Mr. Sandman. That's the thing you need to realize. Ukraine has lost the war. It's over. Tap out. Tap out. Live to fight another day. But unfortunately, the blindness that attends arrogance, in fact, that's the point that Minister Farrakhan made. Never underestimate the blindness that attends arrogance. You don't see with your eyes, you see with a combination of the heart and the mind. And your mind is blinding you to the reality in that desert. That's what he said about Iraq. And the same thing applies here. With all due respect, my brother, no, that's wrong. The Ukraine is lost, and you just need to realize that, tap out, and move the hell on. Rumination with Andrew. How do you mean no one cares what Trump says? Like him or not, he represents the voice of the U.S. What's the MIC? I'm not sure I understand that acronym, USMIC, but I think you're right. Military industrial complex. There we go. You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. How do you mean no one cares? He represents the voice of the U.S. military industrial complex. And that's exactly why they're trying to send more weapons into Ukraine, only to have those weapons. And also understand this, that a lot of the contracts for the weapons that they're agreeing to, they can't produce them. So But Rumination with Andrew is right. He represents the military-industrial complex. And as such, that's a very, 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 very dangerous voice. But a hell of a lot of people are listening to the man. If no one is listening to him, why does Emmanuel Macron say what he's saying? Why does von der Leyen, the head of the EU, say what she's saying? Why does the Chancellor of Germany say what he's saying? Why? Because they're listening to him. And if you don't think so, you need to do some more reading. The U.S. doesn't bluff either. Really? The U.S. doesn't bluff. Okay, then why is the acronym for Donald Trump now TACO? Why is the acronym for Donald Trump now TACO? And I don't mean Taco Bell. It means Trump always chickens out. That is the dominant acronym for Donald Trump. So if the U.S. doesn't bluff, why is the acronym Trump always chickens out? See, this is why you can't just make these statements unless you're just trying to get attention and think that you're saying things clever, because you're not. Let me see. Cherie, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, how Wall Street in the U.S. helped the Bolsheviks take and consolidate power in Russia. Okay, that's not a question. That's a statement. Got it. Rumination with Andrew. George W. Bush, after 9/11, said the U.S. was and is the new Rome. Yeah, and you're right. And that's why the United States, like the Roman Empire, is on its way into decline. Okay, enough of that. O.L. Griffin, no, the Minuteman III is not a hypersonic missile, though it is a powerful ICBM. It is a nuclear-capable missile with a range of over 6,000 miles and a speed of approximately 15,000 miles per hour, Mach 23. Okay, that technical answer, I don't know that. I got to look that up. Very good point, Flash Cloud. The Russians were also asked by those oblasts to intervene. Deep state lovers hate these facts. That is very, very true. And that's one that that I've said many, many times. So when you talk about the ethnic Russians suffering in the Donbass, suffering ethnic cleansing by the Nazis in Ukraine, you are absolutely right. And they begged Russia to intervene for about 6 to 8 years. And Putin got it. And Putin was very, very restrained, and his hand was forced into going in and defending those ethnic Russians that were being ethnically cleansed by the Nazi Ukrainian nationalists in the East. That's a very, very good point. Wilmer, why entertain someone who doesn't have a grasp of actual facts which are readily available? If they simply just look, Russia's defended itself from NATO aggression expansion. Absolutely right. But again, AZ, you try, if someone is taking the time to view the show, and if someone takes the time to comment, again, I'm trying not to be like so many in the mainstream and just exclude people and ignore people. I try to entertain the varying perspectives as I can, but once they become silly, then of course you got to move on. So with that, folks, Thank you all for joining me today. Thank you for engaging today. And tomorrow, Gerald Pereira is going to join us tomorrow, new episode tomorrow, and we'll see if we can get on track with Colonel Wilkerson for Wednesday. Please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. Analysis. This is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we do not chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See you tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.